Very disappointing that Commissioner Strawman is not here today. We see the same thing over in Wisconsin, where the leadership of our wildlife agencies are not showing up for these hearings to listen to the people who truly are sportsmen in our state, in our states. Before I get into the questions at hand here, I do want to ask Dr. Roberts here, you work at a university. We've seen what is going on around the country at various universities that are grabbing headlines these days. What's happening at your university?
Well, thank you for asking, Congressman. Israel is in our minds and in our prayers at College of the Ozarks. We recently hosted a convocation on the plight of Israel for our students and for our community. Our Board of Trustees recently passed unanimously a resolution in support of Israel, and most importantly, calling for a continued prayer for the nation of Israel and her citizens.
Dr. Roberts, isn't it correct that your background, that you've worked for the federal government, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
And is it correct that you worked in Alaska for, was it the Fish and Wildlife Service?
Yes, I worked in Alaska for the National Wildlife Refuge System for the Fish and Wildlife Service.
And Dr. Roberts, haven't you worked in the state of Wisconsin on wildlife issues also?
Yes, I did.
And now you're teaching down at the College of Ozarks, is that accurate?
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the information you gave us in the hearing in regards to you can go up to 29% of take and still not endanger a species. I think that's at the core of what we're discussing here, to make sure that we're making a sound scientific decision in passing a bill like we did this week. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. Most species, there's a surplus that can be taken in a sustainable way. And for wolves, like many other species, we have a good idea of what that is. There are published studies that can help guide that. There are published studies that indicate that somewhere around 30% of the population could be taken in a sustainable way. In other words, you could remove 30% of the population one year and next year have just as many animals.
Also, so I think it was 26 wildlife biologists a decade ago when we had delisting. I was in the state legislature at the time in Wisconsin, and they wrote in their letter, and I don't know if you were a signatory to that letter, but there were 26 wildlife biologists that said, you're going to endanger the Endangered Species Act if you do not allow a delisting to happen when a species should be delisted. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. The Endangered Species Act has the potential to tie the hands of agencies and limit what tools that they can use. And that might be appropriate on a short term to provide some limited protection. But when animals are listed indefinitely, despite ample evidence to suggest that they should not be on the list, I believe that agencies and jurisdictions are going to be very hesitant to want to engage in endangered species management in the future. They don't want another wolf situation. So if there are species that are truly imperiled, I believe that legislatures and agencies are going to be hesitant to do that because they don't want another wolf situation.
And is it the case that we actually have some species that may, numbers may be suffering, that when we're wasting time with, like the Fish and Wildlife Service, on a species that has already, that should be delisted, they could be putting it towards other more worthy efforts. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I just saw that the service was spending in excess of, I believe it was $3 million to develop a recovery plan for a species that's recovered. I would argue that money could be better spent on species that need to be recovered, not species that are recovered.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in closing, I would just say I have the statement of administration policy that the Biden administration put out. We call it the veto message that they put out in regards to this bill. They have backtracked on veto messages in the past over this session of Congress. I would urge you to contact your United States senators here in the Upper Great Lakes here at a critical time in 2024 and make this a prominent issue for all of them. It is us that sets the policy. Let's see if they are willing to stand up for their states Or are they going to stand up for the Biden administration? They have a choice. Do they stand up for Minnesota, for Wisconsin, for Michigan, or do they stand with the Biden administration? They should make that choice this year, and you should help them be able to make that choice. I'm going to close with this. This is intentional in regards to rural America. As my colleague, Representative Hageman, has said a few times on the floor of both committee rooms and the House of Representatives, this is a war on rural America, and you should understand it as such. That is what is going on here. And you need to protect your livelihoods at this point from an administration that is at war with you. I yield back.